Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 4th of May, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and joining me today in the studio is Justin Walker.
Hello, Mike.
And we also have Mark Anderson joining us from the United States, actually from Canada, I believe, over Skype, so we'll speak to Mark in a second. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. Yes, this is my, a second time. I've not sat behind this desk before. So this is my first time, I suppose.
Well, for anybody that doesn't know, Justin is helping run the British Constitution Group campaign at the moment.
That's right.
And you've just moved down to Devon.
We have. We've come down from the frozen wastes of the Yorkshire Dales to the sunny sands of South Devon. And we're thoroughly enjoying ourselves. And the main thing is we've got a lot to do. The Bradbury Pound, obviously that campaign's going to go from strength to strength. But the British Constitution Group, we've got to do a big push. I think everyone's had enough now of what's going on. And we've got a lot of ideas in the fire. We're talking about having a conference in June or July, and then another one in probably the autumn. So many people now are coming up against the system. We need to expose the system and to bring it down by basically getting the 99% of the people who do know that things are happening against them to wake up and to join us.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
Okay.
Let's get started then, and we're going to bring Mark in straight away. Mark, obviously one of the subjects that we've been discussing on the UK column for the last number of weeks has been this drive for the EU army, and you wanted to highlight the Transatlantic Cooperation for Global Security 5th Annual Symposium on the EU's Common Security and Defence Policy.
Yes, this is a group, the delegation of the EU and the United States, that's a lobbying group set up on the legendary K Street, which is Lobbying Row in Washington, D.C. And they have a number of conferences. A quick footnote is that this month they're meeting in Austin, Austin, Texas, because they're going right to the state level in the United States to connect the EU to the US through the lobbying and to lay the groundwork for the 50 state governors and the 50 state governments to support the TTIP treaty. So they're digging down into the grassroots to get that Bilderberg-friendly treaty in place. And I believe they begin meeting in Austin, Texas tomorrow at the University of Texas at Austin, if memory serves. Now, moving on to this item here, as I follow this lobbying group, they're very connected to the Bilderberg agenda and somewhat to the Trilateral Commission agenda. I found this, and at this event that wrapped up April 29th, you have people such as, bear with me a moment, General Mikhail Kostorakos, chairman of the EU Military Committee. So here we have the EU Military Committee's chairman. It's a little early here, not enough coffee, at this event. And we also, as I scan through this, we also had a Dutch minister, Janine Hennis Plaatschart. Boy, I hope I'm not butchering the name, Minister of the Defense of the Netherlands, and also a French military official, Charles Edouard de Coriolis, or something like that. De Coriolis, boy, I'll tell you. French military representative to the EU Military Committee. So clearly, through this lobbying outfit that the EU has transplanted to the United States, they're not only talking about a EU military entity, but also by talking about it in the US, that shows that it's part of the whole overall transatlantic movement, along with TTIP and everything it takes to make the Bilderberg agenda and the agenda of these other think tanks to make it happen, to make it a reality. So I wanted to make sure that we noted this today.
Okay, well, thanks for that. And of course, we'll be talking about TTIP a bit more later on. But also, you wanted to highlight this because we had Barack Obama talking about or intervening in the EU referendum debate a week or so ago. The Mail here pointing out that now it's Warren Buffett and even Bill Clinton getting involved. So what is this? Is this just desperation from David Cameron trying to get some celebrities out to support his languishing campaign?
My first take on it was pretty much that, Mike. They're doing the legendary pile on. They've got to get every voice out there they can to convince everyone that if Britain were to leave the EU, that all hell would break loose. As I've said before, that the very sun would refuse to shine, and that the mountains would crumble to the sea. And it's interesting, Bill Clinton is in there. He's always been on sort of a long leash from Bilderberg since he went there in 91 in Baden Baden, Germany, and he was president the very next year. Now, of course, they have his legendary wife in there clawing her way to the top as best she can, although Bernie Sanders just won Indiana, as did Donald Trump, a quick footnote. But Warren Buffett seems to be invoked every time the globalist boat starts taking on a little bit of water. And Buffett seems to be okay. So this guy's a good investor, so therefore his opinion is good on everything from food recipes to maybe he'll do weather prediction next. Who knows? It's just the American fixation with celebrities and the idea that these political has-beens like Clinton and financial gurus who are otherwise dead ignorant like Buffett, as if their word is beyond gold. So clearly they're desperate, but as you've reported, Mike, the Brexit thing is a bit of a psyop. So they're just playing both sides of the fence to maneuver the UK people where they want.
Indeed. Now we're going to move on to the subject of war or threat of war in a second. But just before I do, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Mark, because I haven't primed you for this at all. But what do you think about Ash Carter?
Well, one thing he did, if this is an indication of character, is in early this year, he, by decree, not with any congressional input, decided that through an executive decision of some kind, that women would be on the front lines in the U.S. military. All the final barriers to women being in the infantry and right on the front lines with men would be mowed over, taken away. So Ash Carter has shown a propensity for an aggressive policy. We have U.S. troops back fighting ISIS that the CIA and Mossad has helped create. And he's made a lot of arbitrary decisions, including women in combat, which, sound soldiers and even women I've interviewed, women soldiers, both current and former, have said is terrible policy, that the training standards for U.S. military will have to be drastically lowered. Nobody's against women in the military in general, but putting them on the front lines is a bad idea. And Ash Carter just made the call unilaterally.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Brian's take on this is that, of course, the issue about training is absolutely one part of it, but the other part of it is that men have a natural disposition to protect women, and therefore, if you put women on the front line, you're distracting the males from doing their job, which is to
Correct.
Right, so this puts everybody at risk, not just the women. Do you have a view on this?
I'm only going to say I was in the Territorial Army for 11 years, and
a toy soldier.
Excuse me, and we were actually working with UDR, the Ulster Defence Regiment, when things were obviously not so good in Northern Ireland, and we were trained in internal security. And we had to have women with us because obviously when you're searching females, you can't have men, doing it particularly. So yes, we did have women on the front line in an internal security situation, but when it comes to a firefight and something like Afghanistan or Iraq, yeah, it's not good. There are a lot of problems.
Yeah, a lot of problems.
A lot of problems.
Okay, well let's get on to why I mentioned Ash Carter here, and that is that Michael Fallon, basically suggesting that Britain is going to send more troops back to Iraq. And this has come as a result of a meeting with Ash Carter, because Ash Carter has been in Europe. He has said in this meeting in Europe, in Stuttgart, in fact, that NATO is prioritizing deployments to Russia's western border to deter Russia. And he's accusing Russia of saber rattling. And he's saying that Russia is threatening the rules-based international order. I'm not quite sure which rules he's speaking about. But anyway, as a result of this meeting with Ash Carter, he's talking about sending people back to Iraq in order to bolster the regime there, which they've created, of course. It already has, but we already have about 300 troops in Iraq at the moment. They're going to send more. And of course, this is alongside Germany and France, who have been discussing how to tackle so-called extremists, which they've created in Libya. So this goes on. But in the meantime, Yemen goes on. And this is the International Development Committee of the House of Commons. They have published a report on the crisis in Yemen. And they are attacking the government on the record, particularly the relationship with Saudi Arabia. Now, what had happened was they had taken some written evidence, and Philip Hammond had provided some written evidence where he had said he was talking about arms exports to Saudi Arabia, and he said there is no clear risk that Saudi Arabia might use the UK export of arms to commit serious violations of international humanitarian law. The Saudi-led coalition are not targeting civilians. Now, we've demonstrated through Vanessa Beeley that this is completely untrue. In fact, what the Cross-Party International Development Committee has said is that the evidence we have received from humanitarian actors operating on the ground in Yemen and respected human rights organizations, including the UN, commissioned evidence, unanimously suggested that humanitarian law is being breached. We recommend that an independent investigation into alleged violations of international humanitarian law by both sides of the conflict in Yemen is conducted without delay. We remain unconvinced that Saudi Arabia is best placed to conduct investigations into reports. Right, well, this was the other thing that Philip Hammond had mentioned, that Saudi Arabia is investigating its own behaviour in Yemen and making decisions about whether it had committed any breaches of international humanitarian law. That's got to take the biscuit, hasn't it? That's tantamount to the British Parliament investigating its own.
Yeah, well, we did say at the beginning of the programme, we used a word that rhymes with Rollocks to describe what was going on.
Yes, indeed.
So,
any thoughts, Mark?
Well, I mean, it's just typical of the mindset that we're dealing with. This stuff is almost beyond parody and beyond comment sometimes. It's just amazing, the lengths that they go to push the agenda. And as he say, it rhymes with Rolex. So.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. Now, of course, Saudi Arabia right at the center of the Yemen conflict. But what Obama will not permit to happen is any kind of release of the redacted 28 pages of the 9/11 report, which allege Saudi government involvement in the 9/11, the events of 9/11. So this is has resulted in a backlash, we might say, in the United States media. New York Post being an example of this, because CIA Director John Brennan had on Sunday television had said that Obama had no intention of declassifying the 28 pages. And so this is Paul Sperry writing in the New York Post, and he's saying that, well, in fact, in this article, he produced a CIA document, which is dated August the 2nd, 2002, in which he's quoted the first page of the 28 pages, which declared or said that there is incontrovertible evidence that there is support for these terrorists from the Saudi government. And Sperry goes on to suggest that to remind Brennan that he was deputy director of the CIA at the time the report was produced. He also attacks Tom Keane and Lee Hamilton, who were the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, because they have reversed their stance on the 28 pages. And they now claim that the 9/11 Commission exonerated Saudi Arabia, and that the release of the 28 pages would, quote, muddy the waters.
Could I just come in and say that before I became involved with the UK Column British Constitution Group and everything else, I was actually co-chair of the UK 9/11 Truth Group. And I'm pleased to say that the same people are still beavering away at the evidence that 9/11 is a pack of lies from beginning to end. But, 15 years on, when you do have such a huge event, which is clearly highly suspect, and that the official narrative can't really be believed, that after 15 years, the cracks are now starting to appear. And my prediction is that the 9/11, the truth about 9/11 will suddenly go like a mudslip. It will suddenly go, and people will then see the real victim, who the real victims were, and who were the real perpetrators.
Mark, any thoughts?
Certainly, to accent what Justin was saying there, this strikes me, and this is purely opinion at this time because they're keeping this under wraps. This strikes me as something of a psyop. 60 Minutes had this on recently, and they're going like, the much ballyhooed 28 pages that nobody's read. Ooh, what's in there? What's behind door number two? And I think it just serves to keep the common official narrative alive in a sort of oblique way because it still implies that Saudi Arabia, as the original government conspiracy theory contends, is behind 9/11. But in my view, and based on the facts that I've studied, just the facts, Judy Wood's research
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
anomalies of the evidence, that is, that something different was used to bring down those towers because so much of the
absolutely.
mass, so much of the material was missing. It's not as if the buildings just fell apart with all that material on the ground. A lot of the material was actually missing. So there's some evidence of high energy weapons having been used, not simply fires and airplanes. Certainly, Saudi Arabia would have little, if any, involvement in some operation like that. But whatever the case of the physical evidence, this strikes me as a psyop to keep the official narrative alive by consistently implying that Saudi Arabia all along has been involved, as the original government conspiracy theory implied. So we need to know more. There's a lot of views to consider, but this strikes me as a psyop.
Can I just come in there and say that I would recommend to all our viewers, if you can, to look up the work of Dr. Judy Wood. Mark is absolutely correct. She's a fantastic lady. What she's exposed is beyond doubt. And there's a very good friend of mine called Andrew Johnson who's got a website called Check the Evidence. And again, I would just urge you to go and visit that because there's no doubt about it. Science now is starting to get to the truth about what happened on that day.
Okay, let's move on then. Unaccompanied children, because this is back in the news now. This is not a quote from Tim Farron, but I think it's pretty much what he was saying. 10,000 children have disappeared across Europe. This is unaccompanied children from Syria. We want them to disappear here instead, because this is really what he was calling for. Frankly, I don't care what happens to them so long as I can say I helped. I'm a humanitarian. That was what we were suggesting was in Tim Farron's mind. The pressure for this continues, and we've got now the Jewish Kinder Transport Pressure Group coming out and suggesting, this is Sir Eric Reich, chairman of the Kinder Transport Association of Jewish Refugees, and he's called on the Prime Minister to do more to help vulnerable victims of the Syria conflict. And he said it was incumbent on us to provide sanctuary to those in need. Now, the question that I have been asking consistently over the last number of weeks since Tim Farron started this campaign was, are we equipped to provide sanctuary to the children that are in need? I want to highlight this report. This is before we do this, in 2010, I should say, the Home Office estimated that around 140,000 children go missing in the UK each year. Now, most of those come back. I'm not suggesting that that's how many just disappear. But this report is the key report. This is from June 2012. It's a report from the Joint Inquiry into Children Who Go Missing from Care. This is really the basis of my questioning of Tim Farron and everybody else that's calling for unaccompanied children to come into this country. The first few paragraphs says it all really. Here we go. There's a scandal going on in England involving children missing from care, and until recent cases of child sexual exploitation in Rochdale and other places put the spotlight on this issue, it was going on pretty much unnoticed. Going missing is a key indicator that a child might be in great danger. When children go missing, they are at very serious risk of physical abuse, sexual exploitation, and sometimes so desperate that they'll rob or steal to survive. Until recently, protecting these children has not been at the top of anyone's priority list. As a consequence, we do not know for sure how many children go missing from care, where they go missing, or what happens to them when they're gone. In fact, even though police data shows that there are an estimated 10,000 individual children going missing in a year from care, So the 140,000 that I mentioned is in total across the population. This report says 10,000 individual children going missing in a year from care. The government's official data only recorded 930 children going missing from care last year. This is a huge and worrying discrepancy. Children are taken into care from their parents because we do not think they're safe or cared for well enough at home. But the evidence clearly shows that we fail to keep the most vulnerable children safe while they're in our care. In fact, children who go missing from care are being systematically failed and placed in great danger by the very systems and professionals who are there to protect them. This is unforgivable, and indeed it is. So the report then goes on to say that there are 68,000 children in care in the UK. It says that, quotes, the local authority with responsibility for a child is required to report on whether they have run away for more than 24 hours to the Department of Education once a year. Data for 2011 shows that 930 individual children went missing. Using this measure of going missing for over 24 hours, police figures suggest 17,000 incidents and 5,000 individual children going missing from care every year. And they go on to say how many of these children return, how many end up being trafficked. The report says there are also major problems with the quality of data collected on trafficked children. The numbers recorded by CEOP, approximately 300 between 2007 and 2010, is widely thought to be the very tip of the iceberg, and the lack of robust and comprehensive data was also identified by the inquiry as a key obstacle to keeping children safe. And the fact of the matter is that even today, it is impossible to get accurate statistics on this. So this report was written 4 years ago, and we still have no major step forward in this situation. So this pressure is now not just Tim Farron. Last week, the House of Lords voted to push the government on this, and there's going to be a vote in Parliament next week. So this now becomes a much broader issue than just Tim Farron, and I'm going to ask everybody on this programme to contact their own MPs and highlight this report. It's a government report, they can't deny it. I want them to answer this. How do we guarantee the safety of these children if they're brought into this country? Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that these children do not need support. They absolutely do. Are they getting it where they are? No. But are we bringing them into a better situation? I don't believe we are. And we've got to really start asking these questions. And the final point I would make about this is this. Because these children are going to be brought to this country, and when they reach the age of 18, the suggestion is that they would be allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain. But this government, once again, has no reputation on this, because here we have the story of people that volunteered to translate for the British Army in Afghanistan, whose lives are in danger, being thrown out of this country because they're not being given leave to remain. This is a disgraceful situation. Yeah. And this is exactly what's going to happen to these children. They're going to build lives in this country, and then they're going to be thrown on the tip.
Yeah, I mean, going back to those Afghan translators, I think that's absolutely disgraceful. If these people have put themselves into harm's way to help our forces in a wartime situation, they should be allowed to stay here forever with their families. So that's disgusting what's going on there. And, you know, with the children, my MP was Tim Farron for 10 years, and I'm afraid to say I have to sum him up as an empty vessel when it comes to big issues. We tackled him on the child abuse front on many occasions to give support to the various campaigns that we had, and he was just not forthcoming. So to me, he is a great disappointment and, as I say, an empty vessel.
Yes. Mark, any thoughts on this?
Simply that the Western-inspired wars are the main reason that there's so much migration of such magnitude in such a relatively short period of time from the Mideast and parts of Africa into the UK and other parts of Europe. This is a direct consequence of Libya and a string of wars sponsored by the US with the involvement of the Israeli government and so on and so forth. They're reaping what they sow, and if they really want to get at the problem, they've got to stop this global warfare that they're doing and carrying it out. So what was that Ash Carter said? So the rules-based international order isn't threatened, which to me translates into our portfolios. and our political buddies and hacks around the world. That's the rules-based international order. They want to protect that more than children.
Indeed. Okay, obviously tomorrow is the local elections and the mayoral elections in London, and so George Osborne has decided to get involved, get in on the act here, and he has weighed into the election in support of Zach Goldsmith, and he says throughout that time, I knew I could work. He was talking about Boris's regime. Throughout that time, I knew I could work with a Conservative mayor in City Hall, and together we could get the best deal for London. Boris and I have worked together to deliver big investment in the capital's infrastructure, attract business and rebuild financial services, so that's the City of London, in other words, strengthen its world-class arts sector and devolve more power out of Whitehall. So what he says is, I want a mayor who wants to work with me to get things done. That's why I'm backing Zach Goldsmith for mayor. I've known Zach for a long time. No one would accuse him of slavishly towing the party line, but I know he's a man I can do business with. I'm committed to further devolution, so tomorrow I urge Londoners to choose Zach's action plan for Greater London so I can work with Zach to keep our economy strong. So I'm sorry, Zach Goldsmith, but I think that's just put a nail in the coffin of any success you're likely to meet there.
Yeah, well, I don't trust any of them. I think they're pox on all their houses. I pity the Londoners, actually, quite honestly. When you looked at the list of candidates, I really pitied them.
Well, of course, for the bigger picture, do have a look at the article on the UK Column website on the Global Parliament of Mayors. Now, of course, speaking of global agendas, let's talk about TPP because, well, it seems that George Osborne, not the only person writing opinion pieces in the media here. We've got Obama writing his own opinion piece. Now, Justin, you're in trouble now.
I am in trouble.
You're going to have to switch that
I'm
off.
going to switch that blessed phone off.
You're not only in trouble for the phone ringing, you're in trouble for having that ringtone. But anyway, we'll get it. So anyway, Obama is speaking in the Washington Post here, writing in the Washington Post, saying the TPP would let America, not China, lead the way in global trade. He's really complaining about what the Chinese are up to. And he's saying last week, China and 15 other nations met in Australia with a goal of getting their deal, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, done before the end of the year. That trade deal won't prevent unfair competition among government-subsidized, state-owned enterprises. It won't protect the free and open internet, nor will it protect intellectual property rights in a way that ensures America's creators, artists, filmmakers, and entrepreneurs get their due. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to pass the TPP. The world has changed. The rules are changing with it. The United States, not countries like China, should write them. And Mark, this guy is off his head, isn't he?
Well, let me tell you, first of all, a quick note. The reason China is powerful is because for years the U.S. has ran a huge trade deficit with China and shipped them a lot of our technology, some of it illegally under the Bill Clinton regime. That was called Chinagate. And throughout the years, China has been strengthened by being on the trade surplus side of most favored nation status via trade with the U.S. Made in China has been the telltale sign of U.S. store shelves for too many years. And what China did is leverage that trade surplus they've had with the U.S., a huge deficit for the U.S. on the other side of the ledger. And they've taken that surplus, leveraged it, and it's become a form of backdoor foreign aid. That's what made China strong, primarily after Nelson Rockefeller through Richard Nixon laid the groundwork for normalization with China and Mao back in the early 1970s. Henry Kissinger was involved, of course, and that's Bilderberg, trilateral type influences on up to the present. So now China can call the shots. They can buy a lot of the U.S. national debt. And so China has become a power at the direct fault of U.S. trade policy.
But I mean, it's not just China that's done well out of that policy, because a lot of the large American corporates have done very well out of the cheap labor that they had for 40 years as well.
That was part of the point, exactly, to have that cheap labor, to send the jobs to China where the labor is. Of course, now they've got it to where they can use H-1B visas and they can bring the cheap labor to the jobs, or they can send the jobs to the cheap labor. these crafty free traders want it both ways, and they do it. And in terms of Obama, he did say something. You're showing this report on the End Global Governance website that's posted now here. He did, however, say what I reported recently in American Free Press and I believe on this show, and that's that the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is too hot to handle for members of Congress. They don't want to vote on this because that's all that remains is a congressional vote on TPP, and then it's going to be signed into law. Due to the authority they granted Obama Trade Promotion Authority, Congress can do no amendments. They have to vote up or down, straight, yes or no. The best TP, as we know, is no TP. I'll say that again. The best TPP is no TPP. However, he did say, vindicating what I reported, that they're going to have to wait until at least after the primaries, even the general elections, when all of the House is up for re-election and 1/3 of the Senate. These guys don't want to touch this, apparently, until after the elections. So that does buy opponents of the TPP some time. They might try and pull a rabbit out of their hat and do something before the elections, but I don't think they have the wherewithal to do that. This is all very interesting.
Can I just ask, Mark, where does Trump stand on TPP?
You know, he moves around a bit. He says America first. He wants to, have a border wall. He says that wall, which is a fence, not a wall, is already partially built. Some of it is rusting. There's huge areas where there's no fence at all. I've tapped on it with a hammer. I've looked at it myself. It's about 16 feet tall. He says things like he wants more tariffs, which is a protectionist measure. Some people say tariffs have some good benefit if used properly. I don't know that he's made an explicit view on the TPP, but he does sound more protectionist on trade, which would tend to be anti-TPP.
Yeah.
So we'll have to look that up.
Okay, so let's get on to TTIP because, of course, that has been in the news in Europe, particularly recently in the last few days because of the Greenpeace leak. The allegation now is from Francois Hollande that he may sort of not support the TTIP. He said that never would we accept the undermining of the essential principles of our agriculture, our culture, or mutual access to public markets, he said. And he said, in view of the United States state of mind today, it seems the most likely option that they would fight against TTIP. I don't believe a word of it. I think this is political posturing and so on. But nonetheless, the point I wanted to make here, Mark, is that Obama is really looking for something to leave behind for his, to say that he had achieved something in his reign of, is it a reign of terror that we've seen over the last 8 years or so? But he really hasn't achieved anything in the timescales he expected to. He didn't close Guantanamo Bay, which is what he said he was going to do. It doesn't look like he's going to get these trade deals through in time, if at all. Has he actually achieved anything in his time as president?
From his point of view, Obamacare would be the only large-scale tangible item that he's achieved. It's a mixed bag. We won't go into the mechanics of it. We won't eat up a valuable time for that. Obamacare would be the main thing, and I think the secondary thing he would list, if you were asking him, would be the Iran deal, that he did reach some kind of reasonable deal, a nuclear deal with Iran. It's not a blank slate for his achievements, but it is rather threadbare, and certainly he'd like to add these trade deals to the mix, but I think they're just too complex and too controversial. And so it's a limited list of achievement. There's that little bit, but it's not much for 8 years. Unless you want to add destroying Libya to the mix, then that would be number 3.
And Syria?
Indeed. And again, that drives all the migrants in, and then they wonder where the migrants come from.
Yeah, so he's done a good job then. Okay,
yes.
Well, global governance then. This is another subject that we've covered extensively over the last few years. And I wanted to highlight the Going Global 2016 conference. This is an open forum for educational world leaders to debate international higher and further education issues and challenges and to discuss collaborative solutions. And who was speaking at it? Well, none other than Matt Hancock, who's Minister for the Cabinet Office and Paymaster General. And he said that the spreading of openness, open democracy, open markets, open societies, open access to education for all have been the seeds of change because these things empower the people. Well, he was in his speech promoting, among other things, this organisation, the Open Government Partnership, which was launched in 2011. And they say that they provide an international platform for domestic reformers committed to making their governments more open, accountable, and responsive to citizens. They say that they've grown from 8 countries to 69 participating countries. And that all of these countries, government and civil society, are working together to develop and implement ambitious open government reforms. So remember, when we see civil society, mention of civil society, we're talking about the third sector. So what we're talking about is basically Cameron's big society pushed out globally.
Communitarianism.
Absolutely, communitarianism. Yep. Now, when we look at the Open Government Foundation Partnership, and look at who's funding them, the usual suspects are all there. We've got the Hewlett Foundation, the Department for International Development of the UK. We've got the Open Society Foundation and the Ford Foundation. And in the previous year, it was the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, Department for International Development, the UK, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and so on. And actually, Soros has funded this organisation over a number of years. Now, the British, he also highlights this, which is SPHERE, SPHEIR, the SPHERE programme. This is funded by the UK. It's a British Council programme. And it's there, they say, to catalyse ambitious multi-sector and high-value partnerships to transform the quality, relevance, access and affordability of higher education. So why is education important to global governance? Well, of course, we've got to create a new generation of little globalists to fill the jobs in the new world. And I think it's best to let Bertrand Russell sum this up because he wrote in The Impact of Science and Society, and I've dropped the I off the front of that. It should say, I think the subject which will be of most importance politically is mass psychology. Its importance has been enormously increased by the growth of modern methods of propaganda. Of these, the most influential is what is called education. Religion plays a part, he said, although a diminishing one. The press, the cinema, the radio play an increasing part. Remember, he wrote this in the 1950s. It may be hoped that in time, anybody will be able to persuade anybody of anything if he can catch the patient young and is provided by the state with money and equipment. And then he went on to say the subject will make great strides. This is a subject of social psychology. Will make great strides when it is taken up by scientists under a scientific dictatorship. The social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. Various results will soon be arrived at. First, that the influence of home is obstructive. Second, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Third, that verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. Fourth, that the opinion that snow is white must be held to show a morbid taste for eccentricity, but I anticipate it's for future scientists to make these maxims precise and discover exactly how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black and how much less it would cost to make them believe it is dark grey. Although this science will be diligently studied, it will be rigidly confined to the governing class. The populace will not be allowed to know how its convictions were generated. When the technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for a generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need for armies or policemen.
George Orwell, 1984. It's all falling into place.
Yes. Mark?
That sounds a lot like Aldous Huxley, too.
That's absolutely right, because they were all part of the same club. They were absolutely H.G. Wells, Aldous Huxley, Bertrand Russell, and the Huxley brothers. Yeah, they were all part of the same.
Yeah.
Were they all in the British roundtables?
They were all I think there were Fabians. There were Fabians. I mean, they networked. They were part of the network for globalism in the 50s and 60s to some extent.
Well, I would add that it's very interesting what he says about redefining reality, snow being black and all that. you see the same thing in the globalese. That's what I term this transnationalist language that we hear from the elites. I call it globalese. They'll say open markets, free trade. What do they mean by the word free? The word free can really trip you up. Free to them means free from public oversight, free from actual democratic control,
Free to
free for
exploit.
them to do what they want. Open markets, open borders means anybody can come across, and the inhabitants of that country to whom into which people are entering have no say so over how many or who crosses their border. So the word open really means anarchy, out of control. Free trade means absence of public oversight, absence of proper regulation, free from morality, liberated from morality. So they do the same thing in our political discourse as they do with black snow.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Couldn't
spot
put it.
on, spot on.
Yeah. Right, Mark. You wanted to end up with the press and the media, and you wanted to highlight Project Syndicate and the ICIJ. Tell us a bit more about what you had in mind here.
Well, here you've talked about the Global Parliament of Mayors and the Going Global 2016 conference. And, this stuff is just everywhere. It's like we're getting hit by a constant hailstorm that won't end. And our roof is just da 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 da. These people never sleep. So the International Consortium of International Journalists, as we've discussed on this show, and as I've mentioned in American Free Press, no one had hardly ever heard of them until they were credited with breaking the Panama Papers caper. And suddenly, lo and behold, who knew rich people are storing money offshore in large amounts? As if we didn't know that already. Is it really that big of a story other than a few details? But suddenly on the world stage, there's this ICIJ, this International Consortium of International Journalists. We look it up, it takes 5 minutes. George Soros Open Society Foundations is behind it. 2 Rockefeller Foundations are behind it. And we're told that that's the organization that's going to uncover where wealthy people put their money and do it in a fair and democratic, you might say, populist manner. And the key, though, to the ICIJ is the elite creating their own large media consortium with hundreds of journalists. But now we have a new kid on the block here. You're showing Project Syndicate, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Once again, a Bilderberg connected Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, and he sends Craig Mundy, a fellow Microsoft official, to the Bilderberg meetings. And Mundy, notably, is on the Bilderberg steering committee. But what I'm seeing is more and more evidence through Project Syndicate and the ICIJ that the elite, not content with controlling the media, are creating their own broad-based media platforms. And this follows their normal function. If they don't co-opt what already exists, they go on and create new entities. And I'm just calling attention to that.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's a response to how successful the so-called alternative media, prefer probably free media, has been in the last few years, and hopefully we've made some small contribution to that.
Indeed.
Okay, well, Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure as always. Hopefully we'll see you next week, maybe. What else is going on with you?
Looking at Trilateral Commission, there'll be some of that in American Free Press soon. What they're up to, some details on so many of their people working in the media and dominating our op-ed pages on critical issues like Brexit. More on Bilderberg and a number of other things, including this EU and the US. We're going to take a harder look at this conference that just wrapped up on European Common Defense Policy and a harder look at what they're doing in Texas.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you. I enjoyed my first effort. It was effort.
And well, I'll be back at the same time tomorrow with Alex Thompson, I believe. So hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.